Marcus Thompson, a 34-year-old single father working two jobs to support his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, encounters Sarah Chen, a woman stranded in a rainstorm after losing her job and apartment. Despite his own financial struggles, Marcus offers her temporary shelter. What begins as a simple act of kindness evolves into an unexpected connection that changes both their lives. When Sarah leaves to rebuild her career, she carries with her the memory of Marcus's compassion and Emma's innocent warmth. Months later, she returns, not as the broken woman who once needed help, but as someone ready to offer love, commitment, and a future neither of them dared to imagine. Chapter 1. The Storm. The autumn rain hammered Detroit's cracked sidewalks with the kind of relentless fury that seemed to match the city's stubborn spirit. Marcus Thompson pulled his worn leather jacket tighter as he hurried down Corktown's main street, his work boots splashing through puddles that reflected the flickering neon signs of corner stores and late-night diners. "Dad, I'm getting soaked." Emma's voice cut through the downpour. At 8 years old, she was all elbows and knees under her oversized yellow raincoat, a hand-me-down from their neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez. "Almost there, sweetheart," Marcus called back, quickening his pace toward their apartment building. The grocery bags in his arms felt heavier with each step, filled with generic brands and marked-down produce that would stretch through the week if they were careful. As they approached the building's entrance, Marcus noticed a figure huddled against the brick wall under the broken awning. A woman in her late 20s sat on a battered suitcase, her dark hair plastered to her face, clutching a soaked cardboard box to her chest. Her professional attire, a navy blazer and dress pants, looked expensive but was now thoroughly drenched. "Dad, look," Emma whispered, tugging at Marcus's sleeve. Marcus had learned to be cautious in the city, but something about the woman's posture, defeated rather than threatening, made him pause. As they drew closer, he could see her shoulders shaking, though whether from cold or crying, he couldn't tell. "Ma'am?" Marcus called out. "You okay?" The woman looked up, revealing tired brown eyes and mascara streaks down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to stay dry for a minute." "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, setting down his groceries. She shook her head quickly. No, I'm fine. She gestured helplessly at the storm. "My car broke down about 6 blocks from here. I called for a ride, but with this weather..." Emma stepped forward, her 8-year-old curiosity overriding any adult caution. "Did you lose your house too?" she asked innocently. "Emma," Marcus warned gently, but the woman's expression softened. "Something like that," she replied, attempting a smile. "I'm Sarah." "I'm Emma, and this is my dad, Marcus," Emma announced with characteristic enthusiasm. "We live right here. Dad works at the car factory and at Jimmy's Diner, and I go to Roosevelt Elementary, and..." "Emma, breathe," Marcus chuckled, then looked back at Sarah. "Look, I don't mean to pry, but you're going to catch pneumonia out here. There's a 24-hour diner about 3 blocks down if you need somewhere warm to wait." Sarah's face crumpled slightly. I spent my last $20 on gas trying to get here. I was supposed to stay with a friend, but..." She trailed off, clearly embarrassed. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain against concrete. Marcus found himself thinking of his own mother, who had raised him alone after his father left. She'd always said that kindness was the one thing that didn't cost anything, but was worth everything. "Listen," he said finally. "I've got a couch. It's not much, but it's dry and warm. You can stay until the storm passes and figure out your next move." Sarah's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly..." "Please," Emma interrupted, grabbing Sarah's free hand. "Dad makes the best hot chocolate, and we have extra blankets." Marcus saw the war playing out across Sarah's face, pride battling desperation. He recognized it because he'd fought the same battle more times than he cared to count. "Just for tonight," he added quietly. No strings attached. Sarah's composure finally cracked, and tears mixed with the rain on her face. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Emma urged. "It's really scary to be alone in the rain." Sarah looked between father and daughter, this man who worked 2 jobs and still offered shelter to a stranger, and this little girl whose innocence shone brighter than the streetlights. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you." As they climbed the narrow stairs to the 3rd floor, Sarah couldn't help but notice the peeling paint and the way Marcus had to jiggle the key just right to open the door. The apartment that greeted them was small but immaculately clean, with mismatched furniture that somehow felt like home. "Dad, can Sarah use my bathroom first?" Emma asked, already pulling towels from a closet. "She's shivering more than me." "Of course, sweetheart." Marcus turned to Sarah. "Emma's right. Get yourself dried off. I'll put some coffee on." As Sarah disappeared into the bathroom, Emma whispered conspiratorially to her father. I like her, Dad. She has sad eyes like you used to have. Marcus knelt down to his daughter's level. What do you mean, sweetheart? Before you started smiling again, Emma said matter-of-factly. When Mommy went to heaven and you thought I didn't notice you crying at night. The simplicity of his daughter's observation hit Marcus like a physical blow. 3 years had passed since the accident that took Lisa, and he thought he'd done a better job hiding his grief from Emma. I'm better now, he said, smoothing her damp hair. I know, Emma smiled. But maybe Sarah needs someone to help her smile again, too. 20 minutes later, they sat around Marcus's small dining table, Sarah wrapped in one of his old college sweatshirts, Emma chattering about her day at school, and Marcus quietly observing how naturally Sarah seemed to fit into their evening routine. So what brought you to Detroit? Marcus asked as he refilled Sarah's coffee mug. Sarah's hands wrapped around the warm ceramic. I had a job lined up at an engineering firm downtown. Or I thought I did. When I showed up today, they told me the position had been eliminated due to budget cuts. She laughed bitterly. I'd already given notice at my old job in Chicago, packed up my apartment, spent my savings on the move. That's awful, Marcus said. Did they give you any severance? Any leads on other positions? They handed me a company coffee mug and wished me luck, Sarah replied. The apartment I was supposed to rent fell through when I couldn't provide proof of employment. My friend Jessica said I could crash at her place, but when I got there, she'd already left for a job in California. Neighbors said she moved out last week. Emma looked up from her coloring book. So you don't have anywhere to go? The question hung in the air with devastating simplicity. Sarah's composure wavered again. I have enough money for maybe a week at a cheap motel. After that, she shrugged helplessly. Marcus found himself studying this woman, Sarah, who'd gone from professional engineer to homeless in the span of a single day. He recognized the shell-shocked expression, the way she held herself like someone waiting for the next blow to fall. The engineering firm downtown, he said slowly. Was it Hartwell and Associates? Sarah nodded. You know them? My buddy Dave works construction. Did some renovations there last month. Word was they'd been bleeding money since their government contract got canceled. Marcus leaned back in his chair. There are other firms in the city, though. Henderson Engineering, Detroit Tech Solutions, a few smaller companies. I've been applying everywhere for months, Sarah said. The market's pretty competitive. Maybe, but you're here now, Marcus replied. Sometimes being in the right place matters more than having the perfect resume. Emma suddenly perked up. Sarah, do you want to see my room? I have a really good view of the street, and Dad helped me put up glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. I'd love to see your stars. As Emma dragged Sarah down the short hallway, Marcus began clearing the dinner dishes. Through the thin walls, he could hear Emma chattering excitedly about her constellation patterns, and Sarah's genuine responses, asking questions about Emma's favorite star and whether she wanted to be an astronaut. The sound of female laughter in his apartment felt foreign and wonderful in a way that caught him off guard. For 3 years, it had been just him and Emma, and while they'd built a good life together, hearing Emma interact with another adult woman made him realize what had been missing. When they returned to the living room, Emma was practically bouncing with excitement. Dad, Sarah knows all about the real constellations. She showed me how to find the Big Dipper from my window. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Marcus said, noting how Sarah's entire demeanor had lightened. But it's past your bedtime. Can Sarah read me a story? Emma asked hopefully. Marcus looked to Sarah, who seemed surprised by the request but pleased. If Sarah doesn't mind, I'd be honored, Sarah replied. As they settled into Emma's room for the bedtime routine, Marcus found himself listening from the kitchen while he finished cleaning up. Sarah's voice was gentle but animated as she read from Emma's worn copy of Charlotte's Web, doing different voices for each character. Emma's delighted giggles punctuated the reading, and Marcus realized his daughter was more animated than she'd been in months. When Sarah finally emerged from Emma's room, she found Marcus setting up pillows and blankets on the couch. She's amazing, Sarah said softly. You're raising an incredible little girl. Thanks, Marcus replied, touched by the sincerity in her voice. She likes you too. That's pretty rare. Emma's usually shy around new people. Maybe she recognizes a fellow lost soul, Sarah said with a wry smile. Marcus handed her a pillow. You don't seem lost to me. Set back maybe, but not lost. How can you be so sure? Marcus considered the question. Because you're here. You could have given up, could have called your parents or taken the first bus back to Chicago. Instead, you're staying. You're fighting for what you came here to find. That takes courage. Sarah sank onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't feel very courageous. I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. Yeah, well, sometimes that's all courage is, Marcus said. Just keeping your head up one more day. As Marcus headed toward his bedroom, Sarah called out quietly, Marcus, thank you. For this. For everything. I know you don't know me, and I know this is a lot to ask of a stranger. Marcus paused in his doorway. My mom used to say that strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. Get some sleep, Sarah. Tomorrow's a new day. As the apartment settled into quiet, Sarah lay awake listening to the sounds of the city. Distant traffic, a neighbor's television, the gentle creak of an old building. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally protected by the kindness of a man who had every reason to be suspicious, and instead had chosen to trust. In his room, Marcus stared at the ceiling, thinking about the woman on his couch and the way Emma had responded to her. 3 years of careful routine, of building a stable life for his daughter, and one rainy evening had introduced a variable he hadn't anticipated. But as he finally drifted off to sleep, Marcus found himself hoping that tomorrow wouldn't be Sarah's last day in their apartment. Chapter 2. Finding Ground. Marcus's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just as it had every weekday for the past 3 years. He slipped quietly out of his room, hoping not to wake Sarah, but found her already sitting at the kitchen table with a steaming mug of coffee, laptop open, still wearing his old University of Michigan sweatshirt. Morning, she said softly, looking up from her screen. I hope you don't mind. I made coffee. I'm kind of an early riser. Mind? You just became my favorite house guest, Marcus replied, pouring himself a cup. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in weeks, Sarah admitted. Your couch is surprisingly comfortable. Marcus noted the dark circles under her eyes had faded slightly, and her posture seemed less defeated than the night before. What are you working on? Job applications, Sarah said, turning the laptop so he could see. I've been up since 4, researching every engineering firm in the Detroit metro area. I found 6 companies I hadn't considered before. That's great, Marcus said, impressed by her initiative. Any promising leads? Sarah's excitement was palpable. Actually, yes. Henderson Engineering posted a new position yesterday, Senior Structural Engineer for Infrastructure Projects. It's exactly what I was doing in Chicago. Dad? Emma's sleepy voice called from her room. Is Sarah still here? I'm here, sweetie, Sarah called back, and Marcus noticed how naturally the endearment came to her. Emma padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Sarah, did you see the stars last night? They were super bright. I did see them, Sarah said, lifting Emma onto her lap without thinking. And guess what? Tonight there's supposed to be a meteor shower. If it's clear, we might be able to see shooting stars. Really? Emma's eyes went wide. Dad, can we watch for shooting stars? Marcus found himself smiling at the domestic scene, Sarah with his daughter on her lap, both of them excited about astronomy, morning sunlight streaming through his small kitchen window. If the weather clears up, sure. I have to get ready for work, Marcus said, checking the clock. Emma, can you show Sarah where everything is while I shower? I can make breakfast too, Emma announced. I know how to make toast and pour cereal and everything, Sarah laughed. I'd love breakfast with you, Emma. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged from his room dressed in his factory uniform, dark jeans, steel-toed boots, and a Detroit manufacturing polo shirt. He found Sarah and Emma at the stove, working together to flip pancakes. We made extras for you, Dad, Emma said proudly. Sarah taught me how to make them fluffy. The secret is not overmixing the batter, Sarah explained, plating a stack for Marcus. My grandmother taught me that when I was about Emma's age. As they ate breakfast together, Marcus found himself studying Sarah's interactions with his daughter. She listened when Emma talked, asked follow-up questions, and treated her like a person rather than just a child. It was something he'd noticed was rare among adults. Sarah, what kind of buildings do you make? Emma asked around a mouthful of pancake. Well, I design them first, Sarah explained. I figure out how to make bridges strong enough to hold cars and trucks, and buildings tall enough to touch the clouds but safe enough that they won't fall down. That's so cool. Dad, did you know Sarah builds bridges? Marcus caught Sarah's eye across the table. I'm learning all kinds of new things about Sarah. I should head out, Marcus said reluctantly, grabbing his lunch from the fridge. I'll be back around 4. Emma gets off the school bus at 3:15. Mrs. Rodriguez next door usually keeps an eye on her until I get home. Actually, Sarah said hesitantly, if you're comfortable with it, I could pick her up from the bus stop. I don't have any interviews scheduled until later this afternoon. Emma perked up immediately. Yes. Can she, Dad? Please? Marcus felt a familiar tug of parental anxiety. Emma was his responsibility, and trusting her care to someone he'd known for less than 24 hours went against every protective instinct he'd developed as a single father. But looking at Sarah, the genuine affection in her eyes when she looked at Emma, the careful way she'd helped with breakfast, the fact that she'd gotten up early to job hunt instead of taking advantage of his hospitality, he found himself nodding. "The bus stop is right in front of the building," he said. "Emma knows the routine. I'll take good care of her," Sarah promised, and Marcus believed her. "What about your interviews?" Marcus asked. "One phone screening at 2 and an in-person at Henderson Engineering at 4:30. Sarah's nervousness was evident. "Honestly, having something to focus on besides my own anxiety will probably help." After Marcus left for work, Sarah and Emma settled into an easy routine. Emma gathered her school supplies while Sarah cleaned up the breakfast dishes, and they walked to the bus stop together, Sarah listening carefully as Emma explained the neighborhood dynamics. "That's Mrs. Rodriguez's window." Emma pointed to the second floor. "She has 7 cats and makes the best empanadas. And Mr. Peterson down there feeds the stray dogs, even though he pretends he doesn't like them." "This seems like a nice neighborhood," Sarah observed, noting how neighbors nodded to Emma and smiled at her. "It is," Emma said seriously. "Dad says we might have to move somewhere cheaper soon, but I hope we don't. All my friends are here." The comment hit Sarah unexpectedly hard. Marcus was struggling financially. She'd noticed the generic groceries, the way he'd calculated the cost of coffee this morning, the stack of bills he'd quickly shuffled aside when she walked into the kitchen. Yet he'd still offered shelter to a stranger. "Your dad is a really good person," Sarah said. "The best," Emma agreed. "He reads to me every night and helps with my homework even when he's super tired from work. And he never yells, even when I accidentally broke his favorite mug." The bus arrived with a wheeze of air brakes, and Emma bounded up the steps, turning to wave at Sarah through the window. "See you after school." Alone for the first time since the storm, Sarah walked back to the apartment and settled at the kitchen table with her laptop. The phone screening went well. Better than well, actually. The hiring manager seemed impressed with her experience and asked detailed technical questions that she answered confidently. By the time Emma returned from school, Sarah was cautiously optimistic about the Henderson engineering position. "How was your day?" Sarah asked as Emma dumped her backpack by the door. "Good. We learned about the solar system in science class, and I told everyone about how you showed me the Big Dipper. Mrs. Chen wants to know if you can come to our class and talk about being an engineer." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I'd love to if I end up staying in Detroit." "You have to stay," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Dad's happier when you're here." "What do you mean?" Emma settled at the table with her homework. "He smiles more. Like real smiles, not just the ones he does when he thinks I'm watching." The observation was so perceptive, so honest, that Sarah didn't know how to respond. Instead, she helped Emma with her math homework, marveling at the little girl's quick mind and creative problem-solving approach. At 3:45, Sarah left for her interview at Henderson Engineering, taking the bus downtown with Emma's hand-drawn good luck card in her purse. The firm's offices occupied 3 floors of a renovated historic building, all exposed brick and modern glass that perfectly captured Detroit's blend of industrial heritage and forward-thinking innovation. The interview lasted 2 hours. Sarah found herself in a conference room with the hiring manager, a senior engineer, and the project director, discussing infrastructure challenges, sustainable design principles, and her experience with complex urban development projects. "Your portfolio is impressive," said Janet Murphy, the project director. "Particularly your work on the Chicago Riverwalk extension. We're bidding on a similar project here, renovating Detroit's Hart Plaza waterfront." "I'd love to be part of that," Sarah said, meaning it. "Detroit has such incredible potential. The bones of this city are so strong." "The position would start immediately," Janet continued. "We're under a tight deadline for the Hart Plaza proposal. Can you commit to that timeline?" Sarah's heart raced. "Absolutely." "Excellent. We'll make our decision by tomorrow afternoon and call you either way." Walking back to Marcus's apartment, Sarah felt a cautious optimism building in her chest. The interview had gone well. Really well. For the first time since arriving in Detroit, she could envision a future here. She found Marcus and Emma in the kitchen, working on dinner together. Emma was standing on a chair, carefully stirring something in a pot while Marcus chopped vegetables. "Sarah's back," Emma announced. "How did it go?" "I think it went well," Sarah said, unable to suppress her smile. "They said they'd call tomorrow." "That's great," Marcus said, and she could hear genuine pleasure in his voice. "We're making Emma's favorite, spaghetti with garlic bread." "Can Sarah eat with us?" Emma asked. "I want to hear about her interview." Over dinner, Sarah found herself describing not just the interview, but her growing excitement about Detroit itself. "Your city has such character," she told Marcus. "All these beautiful old buildings just waiting to be restored, and the people I met today. Everyone seems so invested in making things better. It's a good place to build a life," Marcus agreed. "Not always easy, but good." After dinner, they kept their promise to Emma about watching for meteors. The three of them climbed up to the building's roof, bringing blankets and thermoses of hot chocolate. The Detroit skyline twinkled around them, and despite the city's light pollution, they managed to spot several shooting stars. "Make a wish," Emma whispered each time they saw one. Sarah found herself wishing for the job, for a chance to stay in this city, in this neighborhood, with these people who'd shown her such unexpected kindness. As they packed up to go back inside, Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "What did you wish for?" Sarah glanced at Marcus, who was folding blankets, his profile lit by the city lights. "I wished for new beginnings," she said truthfully. "Me too," Emma said. "I wished for you to stay." That night, as Sarah settled onto the couch again, she reflected on how much had changed in just 2 days. She'd arrived in Detroit broken and desperate, and found herself welcomed into a family that was healing too. Marcus's quiet strength and Emma's boundless optimism had given her something she hadn't realized she'd lost: hope. From his room, Marcus lay awake thinking about the woman in his living room. In 3 years of single parenthood, he'd become expert at reading Emma's moods and needs. His daughter was happier with Sarah around, more animated, more confident, more like the little girl she'd been before Lisa died. But it wasn't just Emma who was changing. Marcus found himself looking forward to coming home from work, curious about Sarah's day, eager to hear Emma's reports of their afternoon adventures. The apartment felt more alive, more like a home than a place where they simply slept and ate. Tomorrow would bring answers about Sarah's job prospects, and with them, decisions about her future in Detroit. Marcus surprised himself by hoping those answers would give her reasons to stay. Chapter 3. Building Bridges. Sarah's phone rang at 10:47 a.m. She'd been pacing Marcus's small living room for the past hour, her laptop open to half-finished job applications she couldn't concentrate on. Emma had left for school with promises that she'd cross her fingers all day, and Marcus had squeezed Sarah's shoulder before heading to work, saying simply, "You've got this." "Sarah Chen, this is Janet Murphy from Henderson Engineering." Sarah's heart hammered as she gripped the phone. "Hello, Ms. Murphy. I'm calling with good news. We'd like to offer you the position of Senior Structural Engineer, with a start date of Monday if you're available." The relief hit Sarah so powerfully that she had to sit down. "Yes," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Yes, I'm absolutely available." They discussed salary, benefits, and the immediate project assignments. The compensation was fair. Not spectacular, but enough to rent a decent apartment and rebuild her savings. As Sarah hung up, she found herself grinning alone in the empty apartment. Her first instinct was to call Marcus, but she knew he'd be on the factory floor. Instead, she decided to surprise him and Emma with a celebration dinner. She walked to the neighborhood grocery store, the same one Marcus shopped at with careful attention to prices. But for once, Sarah didn't look at the cost of ingredients for the chicken parmesan she planned to make. "You seem happy today," observed Mrs. Rodriguez, who was examining avocados in the produce section. "I just got a job," Sarah said, still smiling. "I'm going to be staying in Detroit." "Ah, that's wonderful," Mrs. Rodriguez beamed. "Marcus and Emma, they will be so pleased. That little girl, she's been talking nonstop about you. Sarah this, Sarah that. You've made quite an impression." As Sarah prepared dinner that afternoon, she realized how naturally she'd fallen into the rhythm of Marcus and Emma's life. She knew Emma preferred her sandwiches cut diagonally, that Marcus took his coffee black, that they both liked extra cheese on everything. Small domestic details that felt precious rather than mundane. Emma burst through the door at 3:20, already talking before she'd fully entered the apartment. Sarah, did they call? Do you know? Mrs. Patterson said good news usually comes early and bad news comes late, so since it's still afternoon, maybe." "Emma, breathe," Sarah laughed, pulling the little girl into a hug. "Yes, they called. I got the job." Emma's shriek of joy was probably heard 3 floors down. "Dad's going to be so excited. Can we call him? Can we make a party? Can I tell Mrs. Rodriguez?" "We can do all of those things," Sarah said. "In fact, I'm making a special dinner to celebrate." "What's chicken parmesan?" Emma asked, peering at the ingredients Sarah had laid out. "Something my mom used to make when good things happened," Sarah said, realizing it was the first time she'd mentioned her family to either Marcus or Emma. As they cooked together, Emma peppered Sarah with questions about her new job, her excitement infectious. Will you build bridges we can see from here? Will you wear a hard hat? Do you get to use power tools? At 4:15, Marcus's key turned in the lock. Emma practically launched herself at him. Dad! Dad! Sarah got the job. We're having a celebration dinner. She's making chicken parmesan. Marcus's face broke into a genuine smile as he looked over Emma's head at Sarah, who was standing in the kitchen doorway wearing one of his aprons, flour in her hair, looking more at home than any guest had a right to. Congratulations, he said, and Sarah could hear the genuine happiness in his voice. That's incredible news. Thank you, Sarah said, for everything. I don't think I would have been able to nail that interview if I'd been sleeping in my car and worrying about basic survival. So what's the job? Marcus asked, settling at the kitchen table while Emma chattered about her day at school. Sarah explained the position and the projects she'd be working on. The Hart Plaza renovation is a massive undertaking. They want to create a waterfront space that connects downtown to the river, with pedestrian bridges, green spaces, performance areas. It's the kind of project that could really transform how people experience the city. That sounds amazing, Marcus said. Emma and I love Hart Plaza. We go down there for the summer festivals. Maybe next summer it'll be even better, Sarah said, then caught herself. The casual assumption that she'd still be in their lives next summer surprised her. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily between Sarah's job prospects, Emma's upcoming school science fair, and Marcus's stories from the factory. Sarah found herself studying Marcus as he talked, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at Emma's jokes, the gentle patience in his voice when he helped her practice spelling words, the unconscious way he made sure Emma ate her vegetables without making it a battle. Sarah, Emma said suddenly, now that you have a job, are you going to get your own apartment? The question hung in the air. Sarah looked between father and daughter, realizing she'd been avoiding thinking about this inevitable next step. I'll need to find a place. Yes, Sarah said carefully, but I hope I can find somewhere nearby. I'd hate to lose touch with my favorite 8-year-old. You could stay here longer, Emma said hopefully. Right, Dad? Marcus cleared his throat. Emma, Sarah probably wants her own space, her own things. Actually, Sarah said slowly, if you wouldn't mind having me a little longer, it would help me save money for a security deposit and furniture. I could pay you rent, of course. You don't need to pay us rent, Marcus said quickly. I insist, Sarah replied. You've already done more than enough. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus and Sarah found themselves alone in the living room for the first time since Sarah's first night. She was curled in one corner of the couch with her laptop, researching apartments and calculating budgets, while Marcus watched the news with the volume low. Can I ask you something? Marcus said during a commercial break. Sure. Why engineering? What made you want to build things? Sarah closed her laptop, considering the question. When I was 12, there was an earthquake in California. Not a big one, but big enough to crack the foundation of my elementary school. They had to tear the whole building down and rebuild it. She tucked her legs under herself. I became obsessed with understanding why some buildings fell down and others didn't. My parents thought it was just a phase, but I started checking books out of the library about architecture and engineering, learning about load-bearing walls and seismic safety. That's a pretty serious interest for a 12-year-old, Marcus observed. I like the idea that you could build something that would protect people, Sarah continued, that with the right knowledge and careful planning, you could create spaces where families would be safe, where children could learn and play, without worrying about the ground shifting under their feet. Marcus studied her profile in the lamplight. Is that why you do infrastructure work? Bridges and public spaces? Partly, Sarah said, but also because those projects belong to everyone. When I design a bridge, I'm not just creating a way for cars to cross water. I'm connecting communities, making it possible for people to reach jobs and schools and family they couldn't access before. That's a beautiful way to think about it, Marcus said. What about you? Sarah asked. What made you want to work with cars? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Honestly, it was the best job I could get with a high school diploma when Emma was born. Lisa, Emma's mom, she was in college, studying to be a teacher. The plan was for me to work while she finished school, then I'd go back and get my degree while she taught. But she died, Sarah said gently. Car accident when Emma was 5, Marcus confirmed. Drunk driver ran a red light. He was quiet again, and Sarah didn't push. Suddenly, I was a single dad with a mortgage and no backup plan. The factory job paid well enough to support us, and it had good health insurance. Do you ever think about going back to school? Marcus shrugged. Sometimes. I think about a lot of things, but Emma needs stability right now, and I can't afford to take time off work for classes. Sarah found herself wanting to argue with his resignation, to point out the community college programs that worked around factory schedules, the financial aid available for single parents. But she recognized the bone-deep exhaustion in his voice, the weariness of someone who'd been making survival decisions for so long that dreaming felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. "Emma's lucky to have you," Sarah said instead. "I hope so," Marcus replied. "Some days I feel like I'm just barely keeping my head above water." "But you are keeping your head above water," Sarah pointed out. "You're raising an amazing kid, you're working 2 jobs to provide for her, you're still capable of helping a stranger on a rainy night. That's not barely surviving. That's thriving under impossible circumstances." Marcus looked at her with surprise, as if he'd never considered his situation in those terms. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma calling from her bedroom. "Dad? I can't sleep. My brain is too excited about Sarah's job." Marcus stood to check on her, and Sarah heard the low murmur of his voice as he settled Emma back into bed, probably reading another chapter of Charlotte's Web, or making up a story about brave little girls and their adventures. When he returned to the living room, Sarah had moved to the kitchen and was making tea. "Want some?" she offered, holding up a mug. "Thanks," Marcus said, accepting the steaming cup. "She's wound up about your news. I think she's gotten attached." "I've gotten attached too," Sarah admitted. "To both of you." They stood in the small kitchen, drinking tea and not quite looking at each other, the weight of unspoken implications hanging between them. "Sarah," Marcus said finally, "I want you to know, whatever happens next, however long you stay or where you end up living, these few days have meant a lot to both of us." "They've meant a lot to me too," Sarah said softly. As she settled onto the couch for what might be one of her last nights as Marcus's house guest, Sarah found herself thinking about the bridges she built professionally and the unexpected bridge she'd found here, a connection between her old life and whatever came next, built not from steel and concrete but from kindness and trust and the growing feeling that Detroit might be where she was meant to be. In his room, Marcus lay awake thinking about temporary arrangements and permanent feelings, about the woman in his living room who'd brought laughter back to his daughter and made him remember what it felt like to share the small moments of daily life with someone who cared. 3 days ago, he'd been a single father focused solely on providing stability for Emma. Now he found himself imagining a future that included Sarah, not just as a friend or a neighbor, but as someone who might want to build something lasting with them. The thought both thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. Chapter 4. Coming home. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the window of her new apartment in Midtown Detroit, watching the morning traffic flow along Woodward Avenue. Her one-bedroom place was only 15 minutes from Marcus and Emma's neighborhood, but it felt like a different world. Modern appliances, reliable heating, windows that actually kept out the November wind. She'd been promoted twice at Henderson Engineering. The Hart Plaza project was ahead of schedule and under budget, earning her recognition throughout the company. Her bank account was healthy again. She'd made friends with her coworkers, and she'd even started dating. A few pleasant but unremarkable dinners with men who seemed perfectly nice on paper. So why did she feel so restless? Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad's making pancakes, but they're not as fluffy as yours. When are you coming over?" It was Sunday, and Sarah had fallen into the habit of spending most weekends with Marcus and Emma. She told herself it was because Emma needed consistent female influences, and because Marcus deserved adult conversation after long weeks at the factory. But the truth was more complicated than that. "On my way," she texted back, grabbing her purse and the art supplies she'd picked up for Emma's latest project. The drive to Corktown took her through neighborhoods she was learning to navigate with confidence, past the coffee shop where she'd started taking her laptop to work on personal projects, the bookstore where she'd bought Emma the entire Magic School Bus series, the community center where she'd volunteered to teach a Saturday engineering workshop for kids. Detroit was becoming home in a way that surprised her. Not just the city, but this specific slice of it, these particular streets and the people who lived on them. Marcus's building looked exactly the same, but Sarah noticed details she'd missed during those first desperate days. The way Mrs. Rodriguez kept flowers in her window box even in winter, how Mr. Peterson had quietly fixed the broken front door lock, the children's chalk drawings on the sidewalk that nobody bothered to wash away. "Sarah!" Emma called from the third-floor window. "I can see you. Come up." Sarah climbed the familiar stairs, hearing the sounds of Sunday morning through thin walls, television cartoons, someone practicing violin, the smell of coffee and breakfast cooking. When she reached Marcus's door, it was already open, Emma bouncing in the doorway. "Dad burned the first batch," Emma announced. but he says it was just practice. I heard that, Marcus called from the kitchen, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice. She found him at the stove, hair mussed from sleep, wearing jeans and a University of Michigan t-shirt she'd never seen before. The sight of him, so comfortably domestic, sent an unexpected pang through her chest. "Morning," he said, looking up from the griddle. "Coffee's fresh." "Thanks," Sarah said, pouring herself a mug from the pot. The kitchen routine felt as natural as breathing. She knew where Marcus kept the mugs, how he liked his coffee, the way Emma would eventually appear asking for orange juice in her special cup. "So," Marcus said as they settled around the table, "how was your week?" Sarah told them about the Hart Plaza progress, about her presentation to the city planning committee, about the new junior engineer she was mentoring. But she found herself editing the stories, leaving out the long hours she'd been working, the way she'd thrown herself into projects to avoid thinking about what she actually wanted from her life. "And what about that guy from your office?" Emma asked with 8-year-old directness. "The one who took you to dinner?" Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "How do you even remember that?" "Dad told me," Emma said matter-of-factly. "He said you went on a date. Are you going to marry him?" "Emma," Marcus warned, but Sarah could see he was curious about the answer too. "No," Sarah said, probably more firmly than necessary. "We're just friends." "Why not?" Emma pressed. "Is he mean? Is he ugly? Does he not like kids?" "He's perfectly nice," Sarah said. "We just didn't have much in common." What she didn't say was that David from accounting was perfectly pleasant, perfectly appropriate, and perfectly forgettable. That she'd spent their entire dinner thinking about Emma's science fair project and wondering if Marcus had remembered to pick up his prescription from the pharmacy. "Maybe you're just really picky," Emma suggested. "Dad says that's okay, that you should wait for someone really special." Sarah glanced at Marcus, who was suddenly very focused on cutting his pancakes. "Your dad is a smart man." After breakfast, they settled into their usual Sunday routine. Emma spread her homework across the coffee table while Sarah and Marcus cleaned up the kitchen, working around each other with the easy choreography of people who'd done this dance many times before. "Sarah," Emma called from the living room, "can you help me with my math? Dad's good at addition, but you're better at the word problems." As Sarah knelt beside Emma on the floor, explaining how to break down complex problems into smaller steps, she felt Marcus watching them. When she looked up, his expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. You're really good with her." "She's easy to be good with," Sarah replied, smoothing Emma's hair. "She's amazing. She gets that from her mom," Marcus said softly. It was one of the few times he'd mentioned Lisa voluntarily, and Sarah felt the weight of it. She knew from Emma's stories that Lisa had been creative and patient, that she'd loved to read and had taught Emma to find pictures in clouds. She was a presence in their lives still, in the photos on Emma's dresser, and the way Marcus talked about keeping promises to someone who couldn't hold him accountable anymore. "Emma," Marcus said, "why don't you go get dressed? We should probably get to the grocery store before it gets too crowded." When Emma disappeared into her room, Marcus turned to Sarah. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy?" he asked. "With your job, your apartment, how things have worked out?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "Why do you ask?" Marcus shrugged, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. "You seem, I don't know, different lately. More distant." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She'd been trying so hard to maintain appropriate boundaries, to be a good friend without overstepping, that she'd apparently retreated too far. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Sarah." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his soap and see the concern in his dark eyes. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" The gentle question, combined with his proximity, cracked something open in Sarah's chest. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted. "I have everything I thought I wanted. A good job, financial stability, my own place, but I feel what?" "Lonely," she said quietly. "I feel lonely." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Even when you're here? With us?" "Especially when I'm here," Sarah said, then immediately looked stricken. "That came out wrong. I don't mean—" "I know what you mean," Marcus said softly. The air between them felt charged, full of words neither of them was quite brave enough to say. Sarah found herself studying Marcus's face, noting the laugh lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin that Emma had told her came from a childhood bike accident, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and fragile. "Dad? Sarah?" Emma's voice from the hallway broke the moment. "Are you guys ready to go shopping?" They stepped apart quickly, and Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks. "Almost ready, sweetheart," Marcus called back, his voice only slightly strained. At the grocery store, Sarah found herself hyper-aware of how they must look to strangers, a family doing weekend errands together. Emma rode in the cart despite being too big for it, directing them toward items with the authority of someone who'd been grocery shopping with her father for years. "We need ice cream," Emma announced as they passed the frozen food section. "For movie night." "What movie night?" Marcus asked. "The one we're having tonight," Emma said with 8-year-old logic. "Sarah, you can stay for movie night, right?" Sarah looked to Marcus, who shrugged with a smile. "You're always welcome to stay." "What movie were you thinking?" Sarah asked Emma. "Something with princesses," Emma said immediately. "Or maybe something with talking animals, or both." As they debated the merits of various animated films, Sarah felt the familiar warmth of belonging that both comforted and worried her. This wasn't her family, but it felt like family. Emma wasn't her daughter, but Sarah found herself thinking about Emma's future, about college funds and career advice and teaching her to drive someday. That evening, they spread blankets on Marcus's living room floor and made a nest of pillows in front of the television. Emma, bathed and in her pajamas, settled between Sarah and Marcus with a bowl of popcorn, completely content. The movie was one they'd all seen before, but Emma provided running commentary anyway, pointing out her favorite parts and explaining plot details as if Sarah and Marcus had never seen talking lions before. Halfway through the film, Emma fell asleep against Sarah's shoulder. Sarah started to shift, thinking she should move so Marcus could carry Emma to bed, but Marcus gestured for her to stay still. "She's comfortable," he whispered. So Sarah sat perfectly still, feeling Emma's warm weight against her side, the little girl's breathing deep and even. Marcus reached over to smooth Emma's hair, his hand briefly brushing Sarah's arm, and she felt her heart skip. When the movie ended, Marcus carefully lifted Emma and carried her to her room. Sarah could hear their quiet bedtime routine, teeth brushing, one more story, the gentle negotiation over how many stuffed animals could fit in the bed. Sarah was washing the popcorn bowls when Marcus returned to the kitchen. "She's out cold," he reported. "She always sleeps better after you've been here." "She's an amazing kid," Sarah said. "You're doing such a good job with her." "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping up," Marcus admitted, leaning against the counter beside her. "She grows so fast and she needs things I don't know how to give her. Female perspective, someone to talk to about girl stuff." She can always talk to me," Sarah said. "You know that, right? Whatever she needs, whatever you need, I want to help." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Sarah, can I ask you something else?" "Sure. When you said you felt lonely, is it because you want more from your life? Different things?" Sarah considered the question, drying the bowls with unnecessary care. "I think," she said slowly, "it's because I want different things than I thought I wanted." "Like what?" Sarah set down the dish towel and looked at Marcus directly. "Like this," she said quietly. "Like Sunday mornings and movie nights and helping with homework. Like being part of something that matters." Marcus's expression grew serious. "Sarah, I know it's complicated," she said quickly. "I know you have to think about Emma first. And I know we've never talked about whether there could be something more than friendship between us. But I needed you to know that what I feel for you, for both of you, it's not going away." Marcus was quiet for so long that Sarah began to regret her honesty. Then he stepped closer, close enough to cup her face in his hands. "I've been wanting to have this conversation for months," he said softly, "but I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of messing up the best thing that's happened to us in years," Marcus said. "Scared of wanting something so much that I'd convince myself it was possible even if it wasn't." "What if it is possible?" Sarah asked. Instead of answering with words, Marcus leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when Sarah kissed him back, he deepened it, his hands sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, Sarah felt breathless and slightly dizzy. "I've wanted to do that since that first morning when you made coffee," Marcus admitted. "Just since then?" Sarah teased. "I've wanted to kiss you since you offered me your couch in the rain." Marcus laughed, pressing his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" "Now," Sarah said, "we figure it out together, all three of us." "Emma's going to be over the moon," Marcus said. "She's been asking me when I'm going to marry you." "She has not," Sarah laughed. "She has. Last week she told me you'd make a really good mom because you know how to make fluffy pancakes and you're not afraid of spiders." "Those are pretty solid qualifications," Sarah agreed, her heart full to overflowing. As they stood in Marcus's small kitchen, holding each other and planning a future that suddenly seemed not just possible, but inevitable, Sarah thought about the night 6 months ago when she'd arrived in Detroit with nothing but a suitcase and desperation. She'd come looking for a job and found a home. She'd come as a stranger and found a family. And now, in the arms of a man who'd shown her kindness when she needed it most, she was ready to build something new. Not just the bridges and buildings that were her profession, but a life filled with love and laughter and Sunday morning pancakes. From her bedroom, Emma's sleepy voice called out, "Are you guys being mushy out there? Because if you are, I want to come watch." Sarah and Marcus burst into laughter, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Detroit Free Press headline read, "Hart Plaza Renovation Wins National Design Award." Below it, a photo showed Sarah at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, standing next to Mayor Williams as families explored the new waterfront space she'd helped create. But Sarah barely glanced at the newspaper on the kitchen counter of the house they'd moved into together. A small colonial in Emma's school district, with a backyard big enough for a swing set and a front porch where Marcus could drink his morning coffee. "Sarah!" Emma called from upstairs. "Dad's being weird again." Sarah climbed the stairs to find Marcus standing in the hallway, holding a small velvet box and looking nervous. "He's been carrying that around for a week," Emma informed her matter-of-factly. "I told him he should just ask you already, but he keeps saying it has to be perfect." "Emma Rose Thompson," Marcus said sternly, "you were supposed to be getting ready for school." "I am ready," Emma protested, gesturing to her backpack and coat. "And Sarah should know that you love her enough to marry her, because she loves us enough to marry us too." Sarah looked between father and daughter, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Is that true?" she asked Marcus. Marcus dropped to one knee right there in the hallway, Emma bouncing excitedly beside him. "Sarah Chen," he said, "will you marry us? Both of us? Will you help me raise this incredible kid and build a life that's bigger and better than anything I ever imagined?" "Yes," Sarah said through tears she didn't bother to hide. "Yes, to all of it." As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple solitaire that somehow felt perfect, Emma threw her arms around both of them. "Finally," she said. "Now we can be a real family." "We've been a real family for a while now, sweetheart," Marcus said, pulling them both close. Sarah looked around at their hallway, Emma's artwork on the walls, Marcus's work boots by the door, her own engineering texts stacked on the table, and marveled at how home could be built not from blueprints and foundations, but from love and patience and the courage to trust in unexpected possibilities. Outside, Detroit hummed with morning energy, a city rebuilding itself one project, one family, one act of kindness at a time. And inside their small house, Sarah Thompson-DeBee held her family close and knew that the best bridges weren't always the ones that spanned rivers. Sometimes they were the ones that connected hearts.